The last car pulled away from Riverside Cemetery at 4:37 that Tuesday afternoon, leaving me alone with my son David for the final time. 2 hours later, I sat in my empty house, staring at his graduation photo when my phone shattered the silence. The caller ID showed Westfield High School. Ms. Martha Caldwell's voice trembled through the speaker. "Mr. Giles, I found something about your son. Come to my office right now." Before I could ask why his high school chemistry teacher was calling, she whispered urgently, "And don't tell anyone, especially not your family. You could be in danger." The November rain hammered against my windshield as I drove through the empty streets of Westfield. My mind raced with questions while navigating the familiar route to the high school where David had graduated 14 years ago. The parking lot stretched before me like a dark ocean empty, except for Ms. Caldwell's beat-up Honda Civic and an expensive black Mercedes S-Class that seemed out of place in a teacher's parking lot at 8 in the evening. I parked near the side entrance Ms. Caldwell had mentioned during our brief call. The security light flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the wet pavement. My reflection in the glass doors showed what grief had done to me in just 1 week since David's death. At 67, I'd aged 5 years in 5 days. The lines around my eyes had deepened, and my usually straight shoulders slumped forward like I was carrying an invisible weight. David had been 32, the picture of health. A marathon runner who ate organic, never smoked, and got regular checkups. The doctors called it sudden cardiac arrest, a freak occurrence in someone so young and fit. They said his heart just stopped like a watch that runs out of battery. No warning signs, no previous conditions. One moment he was preparing for his morning run. The next, he was gone. His wife Jennifer found him on their bedroom floor, still in his running clothes. The side door was propped open with a wooden wedge, just as Ms. Caldwell had promised. I stepped into the darkened hallway, my footsteps echoing off the polished floors. The smell of industrial cleaner mixed with that unmistakable scent of American high schools everywhere, a combination of textbooks, teenage anxiety, and cafeteria food that never quite leaves the walls. Room 247 was at the end of the science wing. Through the narrow window in the door, I could see light spilling from under the chemical storage room door at the back of the classroom. I knocked softly before entering the familiar sight of lab tables and periodic table posters bringing back memories of David's high school years. He'd loved chemistry, spent hours after school working on experiments with Ms. Caldwell's guidance. "Ms. Caldwell." I called out, moving between the lab tables toward the storage room. "It's Giles. You said you found something about David." The storage room door opened, but it wasn't Ms. Caldwell who stepped out. My brother Frank stood there holding a manila folder thick with papers. I hadn't seen him in 5 years, not since our argument over our mother's estate. At 64, Frank looked like success itself. Expensive suit, gold watch, shoes that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. His salt and pepper beard was perfectly trimmed, and his cold blue eyes studied me like I was a specimen under a microscope. "Hello, Giles," Frank said, his voice carrying that same condescending tone I remembered from our childhood. "I see Martha called you too. Interesting timing, wouldn't you say?" My body tensed. "What are you doing here, Frank? This is about David, not whatever game you're playing." Frank's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Oh, but it is about David. Did you know your precious son was investigating our father's death from 1995? He found out what really happened that night." The words hit me like a physical blow. Our father William had died in what was ruled a hunting accident nearly 30 years ago. He'd been cleaning his rifle at our family cabin when it discharged. At least, that's what we'd all been told. I was about to respond when Ms. Caldwell emerged from behind her desk, where she'd been crouching. The middle-aged teacher looked terrified, but determined, her graying hair disheveled, and her hands shaking as she held up a tablet. "I'm sorry for the deception, Mr. Giles," she said, her voice stronger than her appearance suggested. "But I needed both of you here. David came to me 6 months ago asking for help with some chemical analysis. He said he was looking into some old family history. I had no idea how deep this went until after he died. She turned the tablet toward us, showing security footage from the school's parking lot. The timestamp read 3 days before David's death. The grainy video showed David's blue Toyota Camry pulling up next to a black Mercedes. The same Mercedes currently sitting in the parking lot. Frank stepped out and embraced David before they both got into Frank's car and drove away. You told everyone at the funeral you hadn't seen David in over a year. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. Frank straightened his tie, a gesture I remembered from when we were kids, and he'd been caught in a lie. David reached out to me. He had questions. I tried to help him understand that some stones are better left unturned. Ms. Caldwell gestured for us to sit at one of the lab tables. She'd arranged 3 chairs in a triangle, with stacks of documents, photographs, and printed emails covering the black surface. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made Frank's face look skeletal. I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he reached for one of the documents, the only sign that his calm exterior might be cracking. David was brilliant. Ms. Caldwell began pulling out a folder marked with his handwriting. When he asked me to help analyze some old evidence, I thought it was for a true crime podcast or something. He said he'd found inconsistencies in his grandfather's death certificate. She spread out several documents. The first was our father's death certificate from December 15, 1995. Cause of death, accidental discharge of firearm. The second was a bank statement from Frank's account, showing a $50,000 cash withdrawal the day before our father's death. The third made my blood run cold. It was a copy of a will dated December 10, 1995, just 5 days before our father died. This will leave everything to you, Giles, Ms. Caldwell explained. The family business, the properties, all the investments. Frank was completely cut out. I stared at the document. Our father had owned a successful construction company, several rental properties, and had investments worth millions. Under the original will, Frank and I were to split everything equally. This new will changed everything, citing Frank's gambling debts and failed businesses as reasons for the disinheritance. I never knew about this will, I said, looking at Frank. After Dad died, we split everything down the middle, just like he'd always said we would. Frank's laugh was bitter. Because I made sure you never saw it. The lawyer who drew it up had a convenient heart attack 2 weeks after Dad's funeral. The only copy was in Dad's safe at the cabin. The cabin where he died. I said, pieces falling into place like a horrible puzzle. Ms. Caldwell pulled out another set of papers. David found the original police report buried in the county archives. Not the official one that was filed, but the initial report from the first officer on scene. Look at this. The handwritten report described the position of the body, the rifle, and notably mentioned signs of struggle and defensive wounds on the deceased's hands. None of this appeared in the final official report. David tracked down that officer, Tom Bradley. Ms. Caldwell continued. He's retired now, living in Florida. When David called him, Bradley was relieved, someone finally asked. He said the scene never sat right with him, but his supervisor told him to rewrite the report. 2 months later, Bradley was transferred to another county. I felt sick. The room seemed to spin as 30 years of lies unraveled before me. Frank, tell me you didn't. Frank stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the rain had intensified, beating against the glass like accusing fingers. Dad was going to destroy everything our family had built. He found out about my gambling, yes, but he didn't understand I was handling it. I had a system. I was going to win it all back. But he wouldn't listen. So you killed him. The words came out strangled, barely human. Frank spun around, his composure finally cracking. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I went to the cabin to talk to him, to make him see reason. We argued. He grabbed the rifle, said he was going to call the police. Have me arrested for embezzlement. We struggled and... He trailed off, running his hands through his hair. And you've been covering it up for 30 years, Ms. Caldwell said quietly. But that's not all David found, is it? Frank's face went pale. She pulled out another document, this one showing a money transfer from Frank's company to a Dr. Eugene Harrison, the county coroner, who had signed off on our father's death as accidental. $50,000 a year for 30 years, she said. That's $1.5 million in hush money. David found the pattern in Dr. Harrison's tax returns. But then Frank's expression changed, shifting from panic to something darker. He walked back to the table, placed both hands flat on the surface, and leaned forward. You're right. David found all of this. He was so proud of himself playing detective. He came to me with this evidence 3 days before he died, just like the video shows. Do you want to know what he said? I couldn't speak. Ms. Caldwell's hand moved slowly toward her pocket. He said he wanted the truth to come out, that our family deserved honesty, that Dad deserved justice. Frank's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I offered him $10 million to forget everything. He refused. I offered him $20 million, my entire company, anything. He still refused. Such a shame about his heart condition. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Ms. Caldwell pulled out her phone, and I realized she'd been recording the entire conversation. Frank saw it too, but instead of panicking, he smiled. Go ahead, Martha. But let me ask you something. Do you really think I've survived 30 years of this without being careful? Do you think David was the first family member to get curious? My blood turned to ice. What do you mean, the first? Frank pulled out his own phone, scrolling through photos. Cousin Robert in 2005. Heart attack at 41. Aunt Patricia in 2010. Stroke at 58. Uncle Harold in 2015. Car accident on a clear day with no other vehicles involved. All of them started asking questions about Dad's death. All of them had unfortunate ends. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the lights and the rain against the windows. I thought of all those family funerals, all those grieving relatives, all those tragic accidents, and unexpected illnesses. How many people had Frank killed to keep his secret? David was just the latest, Frank continued. Though I'll admit, he dug deeper than the others. That's why I had to use something special. A little compound that mimics cardiac arrest perfectly. Undetectable unless you know exactly what to look for. Ms. Caldwell's phone clattered to the table as she fumbled with it. I lunged across the table, grabbing Frank by his expensive lapels. Despite being 67, rage gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. You murdered my son, your own nephew. Frank didn't resist, just looked at me with those cold eyes. Family is just a word, Giles. Money is forever. The sound of sirens cut through our struggle. Ms. Caldwell had managed to dial 911, while Frank and I grappled with each other. Within minutes, the classroom filled with uniformed officers who pulled us apart. Frank straightened his suit, immediately shifting into his businessman persona. Officers, this is just a family disagreement, he said smoothly. My brother is understandably emotional after his son's funeral. I'm happy to leave if that would help calm things down. But the lead officer, Detective Carl Morrison, held up a hand. He was a tall black man in his 50s, with kind eyes that had seen too much. Nobody's going anywhere just yet. Did I hear correctly that this involves David Giles? You knew David? I asked, still breathing hard from the altercation. Coached him in Little League for 3 years, Detective Morrison replied. That kid could hit a fastball like nobody's business. I was at the funeral today. What's this about? Ms. Caldwell stepped forward, her teacher's instinct to explain taking over. Detective, I have evidence that David was murdered, along with several other family members over the past 20 years. I've been recording everything said here tonight. Frank's lawyer materialized as if from thin air. Apparently, he'd been waiting in the car. My client won't be answering any questions without proper representation present. The lawyer announced, his voice sharp as glass. Detective Morrison looked at the documents spread across the table, his expression growing darker with each piece of evidence he examined. Ms. Caldwell, I'm going to need you to come to the station and make a formal statement. Mr. Frank Giles, I'm asking you to voluntarily remain here while we sort this out. Am I under arrest? Frank asked, that smugness creeping back into his voice. Not at this moment, but I strongly advise against leaving. While the detective called for additional units and a forensics team to collect the evidence, I noticed him paying particular attention to one set of documents Ms. Caldwell had set aside. They were insurance policies, and the detective's face went from concerned to alarmed as he read through them. Mr. Giles, he said, turning to me, are you aware your brother has life insurance policies on multiple family members? I shook my head, moving closer to see. The detective spread out 5 policies, all from different companies, to avoid detection patterns. Each one was for $2 million. The beneficiary on all of them, Frank Giles. This one's on you, Giles, the detective said, pointing to a policy dated 3 years ago. This one's on your daughter, Sarah. This one's on your sister, Margaret, in Seattle. This one's on David's widow, Jennifer. My hand shook as I picked up the last policy. It was the newest, dated just 6 months ago. The insured, David Giles. The beneficiary, Frank Giles. The payout, $2 million. And circled in red ink, probably by David himself, was a clause specifying that the policy paid double for accidental death, including sudden cardiac arrest. $4 million, I whispered. You killed my son for $4 million. Frank's lawyer tried to intervene, but Frank waved him off. His arrogance was his weakness. He couldn't resist gloating. It's not about the money, brother. It's about the principle. Our father tried to cut me out. Every relative who died was his blood, his line. I was simply collecting what was owed to me. Detective Morrison had heard enough. Frank Giles, I'm placing you under arrest for suspicion of murder. As he read Frank his rights, I noticed the detective's hands were shaking with barely controlled anger. This wasn't just professional for him. This was personal. The next several hours blurred together. At the police station, I gave my statement while Ms. Caldwell provided her evidence in another room. The detective had called in additional resources, including a forensic accountant to trace Frank's financial dealings and a cold case unit to re-examine the deaths of our relatives. Around midnight, Detective Morrison found me in the waiting area with a cup of terrible police station coffee. Giles, I need to ask you something. Did David ever mention feeling sick in the weeks before he died? Any unusual symptoms? I thought back. He complained about being tired, some dizziness. Jennifer said he'd been having palpitations during his runs. The doctor ran tests, but found nothing abnormal. The detective nodded grimly. We've expedited a toxicology screening on David's blood samples from the autopsy. If your brother used some exotic compound like he claimed, we need to know what it was. He paused, studying me. There's something else. We've been trying to locate Dr. Harrison, the coroner. Your brother's been paying off. He's disappeared. His house is empty, his office is closed, and his car is gone. Frank's cleaning up loose ends. I said, the realization hitting me like a truck. That's what we're thinking. We've put out a bolo on Harrison. But Giles, I need to warn you. If your brother's been planning this for decades, he likely has contingencies. You and your family could be in danger. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Marcus, my son-in-law, married to my daughter Sarah for 5 years. His voice was panicked, words tumbling over each other. Giles, something's wrong with Sarah. We were at Frank's house for coffee. He called, said he wanted to discuss David's estate and make sure the family stayed together. But after she drank the coffee, she started having chest pains. We're in the ambulance heading to Westfield General. Please come. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. Detective Morrison was already moving, shouting orders to units to get to the hospital. As we raced through the empty streets, one thought consumed me. Frank was still playing his game, and my daughter was now a pawn. The emergency room at Westfield General Hospital was controlled chaos when we arrived. Detective Morrison had called ahead, and security was already in place. I found Marcus, pacing in the waiting area, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his designer shirt untucked, and stained with coffee. At 35, my son-in-law typically exuded confidence from his work as a financial advisor. But tonight, he looked like a lost child. "Giles, thank God you're here," he said, gripping my shoulders. The doctors took her back immediately. She was conscious, but her heart rate was all over the place. They said something about arrhythmia. "Tell me exactly what happened at Frank's house." Detective Morrison interrupted his notepad already out. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd noticed had become more frequent since David's death. Frank called around 9:30, said he wanted to meet with family members individually to discuss David's share of the family trust. He mentioned there were some investments and property that needed to be dealt with quickly for tax purposes. "And you just went—" I couldn't keep the accusation out of my voice. "He's family, Giles, and with everything that's happened." Marcus trailed off, then continued. "We got there around 10. Frank seemed normal, maybe a little tense. He made coffee, said it was some expensive Colombian blend. Sarah drank about half a cup before she started feeling dizzy. Within minutes, she was clutching her chest. Detective Morrison and I exchanged glances. The pattern was chillingly familiar. "What about you?" the detective asked. "Did you drink any coffee?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't drink caffeine after 6. Frank seemed annoyed when I declined, kept insisting it was a special occasion. His face paled as the implications sank in. Oh God, he was trying to poison us. Before anyone could answer, Dr. Angela Stewart emerged from the treatment area. I recognized her from David's case. She'd been the attending physician when they brought him in. The young doctor's expression was grave, but not defeated. "Mr. Giles, your daughter is stable. We've administered activated charcoal and are running a full toxicology panel. Her symptoms are remarkably similar to what we documented with David, but we caught it much earlier. She's asking for you." Sarah looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and IV drips. At 29, she'd inherited her mother's delicate features and my stubborn streak. Her eyes, usually bright with intelligence from her work as a software engineer, were clouded with fear and confusion. "Dad," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "Marcus told me about Uncle Frank on the way here. Is it true? Did he really kill David?" I squeezed her hand, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. "We're going to figure everything out, sweetheart. Right now, just focus on getting better." Sarah's grip tightened. "There's something you need to know. Marcus has been meeting with Uncle Frank for months. He didn't want me to tell you." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I turned to look at Marcus, who had followed us into the room. His face had gone from pale to ashen, and he took an involuntary step backward. "Sarah, honey, you're confused from the medication." Marcus started, but Sarah cut him off with unexpected strength. "Don't lie anymore," she said, trying to sit up before a nurse gently pushed her back down. "Dad deserves to know. Uncle Frank promised Marcus he'd make him CFO of his company. He said with David gone, there would be an opening at the top. All Marcus had to do was help resolve family issues." The room seemed to shrink around us. Detective Morrison stepped forward, his hand moving to his service weapon. "Mr. Marcus Taylor, I'm going to need you to step outside with me." But Marcus wasn't done. Something in him seemed to snap, and years of resentment came pouring out. "You want to know the truth, Giles Fine?" "Yes. I've been working with Frank. Do you have any idea what it's like being the son-in-law who's never good enough? David was the golden child, the marathon runner, the perfect son. Every family gathering, every holiday, it was always about David's latest achievement. So you helped kill him?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "No," Marcus shouted. "I didn't know Frank was planning that. He said he just wanted information about the family's finances, wanted to know who was vulnerable to a buyout. He offered me $500,000 and a position that would finally let me provide for Sarah the way she deserves." Sarah began to cry, the heart monitor beeping faster with her distress. "I don't need money, Marcus. I needed a husband who didn't sell out my family." Marcus reached for her, but Detective Morrison intervened. "Sir, I need you to come with me now. You're not under arrest, but you need to answer some questions." As they led Marcus away, he turned back one last time. "The coffee was meant for you, Giles. Frank said you always visited him on Thursday mornings to go over the family trust. Sarah drank it by mistake. I swear I didn't know it was poisoned. I thought it was just business, just money." The next few hours passed in a haze of medical updates and police interviews. The toxicology report confirmed what we'd suspected. Sarah had ingested a concentrated extract from the gelsemium plant, known as heartbreak grass in some circles. It caused symptoms mimicking heart failure and was nearly undetectable unless specifically tested for. The same substance was found in preserved samples from David's autopsy. Dr. Stewart explained that Sarah's survival was pure luck. She'd drunk less coffee than intended, and her younger age and healthy heart had fought off the worst effects. With treatment, she would make a full recovery. Detective Morrison returned around 3 in the morning with updates. Marcus had broken down completely, providing a full confession of his involvement with Frank. He'd supplied Frank with family financial information schedules and personal details that helped Frank plan his attacks. In exchange, Marcus received monthly payments and the promise of a lucrative future. The good news is, Marcus recorded some of his conversations with Frank, the detective explained. Apparently, he got nervous after David's death and wanted insurance. The bad news is, Frank's in the wind. His house is empty, his offices are closed, and his bank accounts have been cleaned out. I slumped in the uncomfortable waiting room chair, exhaustion weighing on me like a lead blanket. In one night, I'd lost a brother and a son-in-law to greed and deception. But at least Sarah was alive, and we finally had proof of Frank's crimes. "We'll find him," Detective Morrison assured me. "Men like Frank always make mistakes when they're running. His ego won't let him disappear quietly." As dawn broke over Westfield, painting the hospital room in soft gold light, I sat beside Sarah's bed, holding her hand while she slept. The monitors beeped steadily, each sound a reminder that she was still here, still fighting. I thought about David, about all the relatives we'd lost, about the years of lies and murder, hidden behind family smiles and holiday dinners. Frank had underestimated us. He thought grief would make us weak, that his money and power could buy silence forever. But David had been smarter, braver than Frank ever imagined. Even in death, my son was fighting for justice. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos. David at his wedding, Sarah's college graduation family barbecues, where Frank stood in the background, always watching, always calculating. How long had he been planning each death? How many family gatherings had been scouting missions for his next victim? A text message interrupted my thoughts. Unknown number. My blood chilled as I read. "You should have taken the money, brother. David learned that lesson too late. You won't find me, but I'll find you. The family reunion isn't over yet. F." I showed the message to the officer stationed outside Sarah's room. Within minutes, tech specialists were tracing the phone, but I knew they'd find another burner, another dead end. Frank had 3 decades of practice at this game. But I had something Frank didn't expect: David's meticulous research and a determination forged from loss. My son had left breadcrumbs, and I would follow every single one until justice was served. 3 days after Sarah's poisoning, I stood in my kitchen at 5 in the morning, staring at the burner phone Detective Morrison had given me. The plan we'd hatched was dangerous, possibly foolish, but it was our best shot at drawing Frank out of hiding. The FBI had joined the investigation, given the interstate nature of Frank's crimes, but even their resources had turned up empty. Frank had vanished like smoke, taking millions in cash and leaving behind a trail of shell companies and false identities. "Are you sure about this?" Detective Morrison asked for the 10th time. He sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by surveillance equipment and backup communication devices. 2 undercover officers were positioned in a van outside, and another team waited at Frank's abandoned house. I nodded, though my hands trembled as I dialed Frank's emergency number. One he'd given me years ago, for family emergencies only. It rang once, twice, then his voice calm as ever. "Hello, Giles. I wondered when you'd call." "Frank, I'm tired," I said, following the script we'd rehearsed, but letting real exhaustion creep into my voice. "Sarah almost died. I can't lose anyone else. Tell me what you want to end this." A pause. I could practically hear him thinking, calculating. "You know what I want. What I've always wanted. Recognition that I was cheated, that our father's fortune should have been mine." "Then take it," I said. "I'll sign over my shares in the family trust. The property's everything. Just leave my family alone. And in exchange, you disappear. Forever. And you give me the antidote, or whatever you used on David and Sarah, in case there are lingering effects." Frank laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "You think I'm stupid, brother? This call is being recorded. You've got cops sitting in your kitchen right now." I looked at Detective Morrison, who nodded encouragingly. "Time to go off script." "You're right. They're here. But Frank, I'm 70 years old. I buried my son. My daughter's in the hospital. My son-in-law betrayed us. I don't care about justice anymore. I just want peace." "Peace," Frank repeated. "Dad used to talk about peace. Right before he threatened to destroy my life over a few gambling debts. Is that what you tell yourself, that it was just about gambling?" I let anger creep into my voice. Not hard, given the circumstances. "You embezzled $800,000 from the company. You nearly bankrupted us." "I would have paid it back." Frank's composure cracked. "I had a system, I had plans. But Dad wouldn't listen. Just like David wouldn't listen. Just like you won't listen." "I'm listening now," I said softly. "Meet me at the cabin, where it all started. We'll end this like brothers should, face to face." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, "You come alone. No wires, no weapons, no cops. Just the papers signing over your assets. I'll know if you try anything."
"When?"
"Tonight, midnight. And Giles, if I see a single cop car within 10 miles of that cabin, everyone you love dies. I've got contingencies you can't imagine." The line went dead. Detective Morrison immediately began coordinating with his team, but I was already thinking ahead. Frank knew me better than anyone. He'd expect the police to follow regardless of his threats. But he didn't know about the cassette recorder in my jacket pocket, the one David had given me as a joke last Christmas. "For your memoirs, Dad," he'd said. "Every family needs a historian." The rest of the day passed in preparation. Against Detective Morrison's protests, I insisted on going alone. We compromised. They would position units outside the 10-mile radius and move in only after I gave a signal. I wore a wire, knowing Frank would find it and, hopefully, be satisfied he'd outsmarted us. The real recording device, the cassette player, was hidden in a secret pocket Jennifer had sewn into my jacket years ago when I traveled to dangerous construction sites. As night fell, I drove toward the cabin where my father had died 30 years ago. The familiar route through winding mountain roads brought back memories. Family summers spent fishing, teaching David and Sarah to swim in the lake the last Christmas before Dad's death, when Frank had seemed genuinely happy. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by pine trees that whispered secrets in the wind. Frank's Mercedes was already there, parked beside Dad's old tool shed. The porch light was on, casting long shadows across the wooden deck, where Dad had taught us to whittle. I parked and stepped out, immediately raising my hands as Frank emerged from the shadows, a pistol trained on me. Even in the dim light, I could see how the last few days had affected him. His perfect appearance was gone. Stubble covered his jaw. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes darted constantly, paranoid and wild. "Stop right there," he commanded. "Strip to your underwear." I complied, the November cold biting into my skin. Frank approached cautiously, finding the wire immediately. He ripped it off with satisfaction, then had me turn in circles, checking for other devices. He missed the cassette recorder, hidden beneath a false lining. "Get dressed," he said, seemingly satisfied. Inside. The cabin hadn't changed much in 30 years. Dad's hunting trophies still lined the walls. His favorite chair still sat by the fireplace. Dark stains on the floor marked where he'd died, a macabre reminder of how this all began. Frank had set up a folding table with documents spread across it. Transfer papers for various assets, bank accounts, property deeds. A bottle of whiskey sat beside 2 glasses, a mockery of civilized negotiation. "Sit," Frank ordered, keeping the gun pointed at me, while he poured drinks with his free hand. "You know, I've thought about this moment for years. You playing the grieving father, me, finally getting what's mine." I sat carefully, pressing record on the cassette player through the fabric of my jacket. "It doesn't have to be like this, Frank. We're brothers." "Brothers?" Frank laughed bitterly. "You were Dad's favorite from day one. Giles the responsible one. Giles the trustworthy one. I was just the screw-up, the disappointment." "That's not true." "Shut up." Frank slammed the whiskey bottle down. "You have no idea what it was like. Every mistake magnified, every success ignored. Do you know what Dad said to me the night he died? He said I was a cancer on the family name." "A cancer?" I remained silent, letting him vent. The recorder was capturing everything. Frank began pacing, gun waving erratically. "But I showed him. I showed all of them. Cousin Robert started asking questions about the will, had to go. Aunt Patricia hired a private investigator, couldn't have that. Uncle Harold found discrepancies in the company books from '95. One by one, I protected our family secret." "You mean your secret?" I said quietly. "My secret." Frank whirled on me. "You benefited too. You got half the inheritance that should have all been mine. Every dollar you spent, every success you had was built on my sacrifice. Sacrifice. You murdered our father." Frank's face contorted. He was going to destroy me, disinherit me, press charges, send me to prison. What choice did I have? "You could have asked for help. I would have helped you. Like you helped when I came to you 5 years ago needing a loan. You lectured me about responsibility, about learning from mistakes. Sanctimonious bastard." I remembered that conversation. Frank had wanted $2 million for another sure-thing investment. I'd refused, offering instead to pay for financial counseling. It was the last time we'd spoken before tonight. "So, you decided to kill my son?" I asked, real anguish breaking through. Frank's expression shifted, something like regret flickering across his features. David was brilliant. Too brilliant. He connected dots no one else had even seen. When he confronted me with evidence about Dad, about the others, I tried to reason with him. Offered him money, power, anything he wanted. But he was just like you. Self-righteous, unbending. He was seeking justice. Justice. Frank laughed. "There is no justice, only survival. Dad taught me that when he tried to cast me out. But I survived. I thrived. Built an empire while pretending to be the reformed black sheep. Built on blood money. Built on family graves." Frank shrugged. "Everyone dies eventually. I just expedited the process for those who threatened our stability." I stood slowly, Frank tracking me with the gun. "Our stability. Frank, you're alone. You've killed everyone who might have loved you." "Love." Frank's voice cracked. "Love is a luxury I couldn't afford. But respect, fear those I earned." I moved toward the window, supposedly looking out at the dark forest. In reality, I was positioning myself so the recorder would better capture Frank's voice. "Tell me about the poison. The gelsemium extract. How did you even find out about it?" Frank seemed pleased by my interest, his ego overcoming caution. "Beautiful, isn't it? Grows wild in certain parts of Asia. Causes cardiac symptoms that mirror natural heart failure. I had a chemist in Hong Kong synthesize a concentrated version. Undetectable, unless you specifically test for it. And who tests for exotic plant toxins in a routine autopsy? How many others, Frank? How many family members did you poison over the years?" He tilted his head, calculating. 7 confirmed. Maybe 8. Cousin Marie's death in 2018 was suspicious, but I can't take credit for that one. Might have actually been natural causes. 7 murders. 8, if you counted our father. My brother had turned family gatherings into hunting grounds, holiday dinners into crime scenes. The cassette recorder whirred softly in my pocket, capturing every damning word. But here's the beautiful part. Frank continued warming to his subject like a professor lecturing on his specialty. Each death was perfectly timed. Robert was about to expose irregularities in the family trust. Patricia's investigator was getting close to the truth about Dad. Harold found those old embezzlement records. Each one thought they were so clever, so righteous. Just like David. And Sarah, my daughter, never investigated anything. Frank's expression hardened. Collateral damage. The coffee was meant for you, obviously. Your Thursday morning visits were predictable as clockwork. But when you didn't show up, I had to improvise. Marcus assured me you'd come if family was involved. So you poisoned your own coffee to kill me. Poisoned your cup specifically. The one with the small chip on the handle. You always chose that one. Creature of habit. But that stupid girl grabbed it instead. He shook his head in annoyance, as if Sarah's near death was merely an inconvenience. My rage must have shown because Frank raised the gun higher. Careful, brother. We're not done here. Sign the papers. I moved to the table, picking up the pen. As I pretended to read through the documents, I calculated distances and angles. Frank stood about 8 feet away, gun steady, but not aimed directly at me. The cabin door was 12 feet behind him. Too far to rush without getting shot. You know they'll catch you eventually, I said, signing the first document. The FBI is involved now. International agencies. You can't run forever. Frank smiled. I don't need forever. Just long enough to disappear properly. New identity, new country, new life. The money from your assets will help with that. What about Marcus? He knows things. He'll testify. Marcus is a coward who'll say anything to avoid prison. His testimony will be worthless without corroboration. Frank gestured at the papers. Keep signing. As I worked through the stack, I noticed something Frank hadn't. Car lights in the distance quickly extinguished. The police had ignored the 10-mile restriction. They were coming, but not fast enough. Frank would see them soon. I needed to give them time and evidence. Tell me about the night Dad died. What really happened? Frank's eyes went distant. It was cold like tonight. He was cleaning his rifle just like the report said. But he wasn't alone. I came in through the back door. Still had my key from when we were kids. He didn't hear me until I was right behind him. And then, I told him about the new will, said I knew everything. He laughed. Actually laughed. Said I'd finally proven I was exactly the failure he thought I was. That's when I grabbed the rifle. He fought back. The defensive wounds. Of course he did. Dad was tough even at 72. But I was younger, stronger, and desperate. In the struggle, the gun went off. Frank's voice dropped. The look in his eyes when he realized what was happening. He said my name. Just once. Franklin. Not Frank, not son. Franklin, like when I was a boy and had done something wrong. For a moment I saw my brother as he truly was. Not a cold-blooded killer, but a broken man who'd let resentment and greed consume him until nothing human remained. Then, the moment passed, and the monster returned. Touching story, I said, signing the last paper. But it doesn't excuse 30 years of murder. I'm not looking for excuses, Frank replied. Just results. He moved forward to collect the paper's gun still trained on me. You know, Giles, I actually am sorry about David. He reminded me of you at that age. Principled, stubborn, brave. In another life, I might have been proud to call him nephew. He was proud of you once, I said quietly. When he was young, he idolized Uncle Frank, the successful businessman. He kept a photo from his 10th birthday party on his desk. You, teaching him to play chess. Something flickered in Frank's eyes. Pain, maybe, or just annoyance at sentiment. Chess. Yes, I remember. He was a quick learner. Beat me by the time he was 12. He beat you again, Frank. Even dead, he beat you. His research, his evidence, his refusal to be bought, that's what brought you down, not me. Frank's face contorted with rage. Shut up. Just shut up. The gun shook in his hand. You think you've won. You think this ends with my arrest? I've got insurance policies on half the family. Offshore accounts you'll never find. Connections that... He stopped mid-sentence, head cocked. He'd heard them. Car engines in the distance getting closer. His eyes widened with realization, then narrowed with fury. You lying bastard, he snarled. You brought them anyway. Did you really think I'd come alone? I asked, backing away from the table. That I'd trust the man who killed my son? Frank's expression cycled through rage, betrayal, and finally, a cold determination. Then we end this the way we should have 30 years ago. He raised the gun, aiming directly at my chest. At least I'll take one more of Dad's precious bloodline with me. Time slowed. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the muzzle flash, felt the impact as the bullet caught me in the shoulder instead of the heart. My last second dodge saving my life. I fell backward, crashing into Dad's chair, pain exploding through my body. Frank advanced for a killing shot, but the cabin door exploded inward. Detective Morrison and a SWAT team flooded in weapons-drawn shouting commands. Frank spun toward them, gun rising, and I knew with terrible certainty he wouldn't surrender. Don't, I shouted, but it was too late. Frank aimed at the officers and they responded with trained precision. Multiple shots echoed in the small cabin, and my brother crumpled to the floor beside our father's bloodstain. I crawled to him, pressing my hand against my bleeding shoulder. Frank lay on his back, eyes, already glazing blood pooling beneath him. He looked up at me with something like surprise. Giles, he whispered, blood bubbling on his lips. Tell me, was it worth it? All of it? I gripped his hand, feeling it grow cold. No, Frank. None of it was worth it. He tried to laugh, but only managed a wet cough. Dad was right. I was the cancer. His eyes fixed on something beyond me, and my brother was gone. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room hummed as I woke from surgery, my shoulder wrapped in bandages, and my mind foggy from painkillers. Detective Morrison sat in the visitor's chair, looking exhausted but relieved. Welcome back, he said. You've been out for 6 hours. Bullet went clean through. You'll have a nice scar, but no permanent damage. I tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. Frank? Morrison shook his head. He didn't make it. Fired on officers, gave us no choice. He paused, studying my face. I'm sorry, Giles. I know he was family. Family. The word felt hollow after everything Frank had done. What about the evidence? The recording? The cassette player survived. We've got his full confession. Your father, David, all the others. Combined with the documents Ms. Caldwell saved, and Marcus's testimony, we've got enough to close multiple cold cases. Morrison leaned forward. But there's something else. Frank wasn't lying about having contingencies. My blood chilled. What do you mean? Dr. Harrison, the coroner. Frank was paying off. We found him this morning, dead in a motel room 2 states over. Apparent suicide, but the timing is suspicious. And that's not all. Morrison pulled out his phone, showing me a news article. 3 of Frank's business associates have died in the last 72 hours. Car accident, heart attack, and a fall from a building. All had connections to Frank's money laundering operations. He's cleaning house from beyond the grave, I realized. He must have had agreements in place, people who would act if anything happened to him. Morrison nodded grimly. FBI's working on it, but Frank covered his tracks well. We may never find all the threads. Over the next 3 days, as I recovered in the hospital, more disturbing news emerged. Bank accounts in the Caymans had been emptied, safe deposit boxes accessed and cleared. A storage unit in Nevada registered under one of Frank's aliases was found burned to the ground. Whatever secrets Frank had accumulated over 30 years of murder and fraud were being systematically destroyed. But then, on the 4th day, hope arrived in an unexpected form. Jennifer David's widow appeared in my hospital room carrying a laptop bag and looking determined despite her grief. "Giles," she said, setting the bag on my bedside table. "I found something in David's things. A backup drive hidden inside an old external hard drive case. He labeled it insurance." My hands shook as she pulled out the drive. David always thinking ahead, always prepared. Even facing death, he'd made provisions. We called Detective Morrison, who brought in a computer forensics expert. As the files loaded, we all held our breath. What appeared on screen exceeded our wildest hopes. David had documented everything, financial records going back decades, showing Frank's embezzlement and money laundering, recorded phone conversations between Frank and various accomplices, medical records he'd somehow obtained on all the family members who died suspiciously, and most damning, email exchanges between Frank and Dr. Harrison discussing payment schedules and biological solutions. "This is incredible," the forensics expert breathed. "He's got Frank's entire network mapped out. Shell companies, associates, even backup plans for eliminating witnesses." One file was labeled Dead Man's Switch. Inside were detailed instructions David had written. "If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Frank got to me before I could expose him. But I won't let him win. Use this information to destroy his empire and bring justice to our family." The password for the encrypted files is Sarah's birthday, combined with the date Grandpa died. Frank killed them all. Don't let him kill anymore. "David." Jennifer was crying silently, clutching my good hand. "He knew," she whispered. "David knew Frank might kill him, but he faced him anyway. To protect the rest of us?" I said, my own eyes burning with tears. The encrypted files revealed the full scope of Frank's crimes. Not just the family murders, but bribes to city officials, blackmail of business competitors, even connections to international crime syndicates who helped launder his money. David had spent 2 years building this case, working in secret to avoid tipping Frank off. One folder contained something that made my heart stop. Surveillance photos of Sarah Jennifer and other family members, all date-stamped within the last year. Frank had been watching everyone, preparing his next moves like a chess grandmaster, planning 20 steps ahead. "He was going to kill us all eventually," Morrison said quietly. "Anyone who might inherit, anyone who might ask questions." David's investigation forced his hand, made him act before he was ready. Among the files was a video David had recorded just a week before his death. He sat at his home office desk, looking tired but resolute. "Dad, if you're watching this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you what I was doing. Frank has eyes everywhere, and I couldn't risk him finding out. But I need you to know the truth. Uncle Frank killed Grandpa. He killed Robert, Patricia, Harold, Marie, and at least 3 others. I have proof of everything. I'm meeting with Frank tomorrow. I'll offer him a chance to confess to make things right. I know he won't take it, but I have to try. He's still family despite everything. If something happens to me, know that I love you. I love Sarah. I love Mom's memory. And I did this for all of us. The evidence is with Ms. Caldwell and in this drive. Don't let my death be in vain. Get justice for our family. And Dad. That chess set Uncle Frank gave me for my 10th birthday. I kept it all these years because I wanted to believe there was still good in him. Maybe there was once. But greed poisoned him worse than any gelsemium extract. Don't let it poison you too. Choose justice, but also choose peace. I love you, David." The room was silent, except for Jennifer's quiet sobs. My son had walked knowingly into danger, armed with truth and hope for redemption that Frank could never offer. He'd died a hero even if only we few knew it. Over the following weeks, David's evidence led to a cascade of arrests. Frank's network crumbled as associates turned on each other for plea deals. Offshore accounts were frozen, assets seized. The FBI uncovered connections to 6 more suspicious deaths in other states. Business partners who'd asked too many questions. Accountants who'd noticed discrepancies. Marcus pled guilty to conspiracy charges and received 10 years in prison. Sarah filed for divorce from her hospital bed, unable to forgive his betrayal. Dr. Harrison's supposed suicide was ruled a murder when forensics found evidence of struggle. His killer was never found, but investigators suspected one of Frank's cleaners had eliminated him. Ms. Caldwell was hailed as a hero for protecting David's research. She used her newfound fame to establish a scholarship in David's name for students interested in criminal justice. David believed in truth, she said at the dedication ceremony. This scholarship will help others follow in his footsteps. 3 months after that night at the cabin, we held a memorial service for all of Frank's victims. The small church in Westfield overflowed with family members I hadn't seen in years, all of us connected by loss and betrayal. We read the names of the dead: William Robert Patricia, Harold Marie, Thomas Agnes, and David. Each name a life cut short, a future stolen. I spoke last, my shoulder still aching, but my voice strong. My brother Franklin became a monster through his own choices. He let greed and resentment poison his soul until nothing human remained. But in his darkness, he couldn't extinguish the light of those he killed. My father William taught us about justice. My son David died pursuing it. Today, we honor them not with hatred for Frank, but with love for each other. Frank spent 30 years dividing our family through fear and death. We will spend the next 30 years rebuilding it through trust and life. That is our justice. That is our revenge. And that is our peace. After the service, I stood at David's grave. His real grave this time. Jennifer and Sarah flanked me, 3 survivors bound by loss, but not broken by it. The headstone read, David Giles, son, husband, hero. Truth was his weapon, justice, his legacy. We did it, son, I whispered to the granite marker. We got them all. You can rest now. As we walked away, Sarah squeezed my hand. Do you think David knew? When he met with Frank that last time, do you think he knew he wouldn't come back? I thought about my son's final video, his calm acceptance of what might come. I think he knew the risk, but he also knew that some things are worth dying for. Family, truth, justice. He made his choice, and his choice saved us all. I want to be like him, Sarah said firmly. I'm going back to school for law enforcement. Maybe join the FBI, help catch people like Uncle Frank before they can hurt anyone. I smiled, the first real smile since David's death. He'd be proud of you. I'm proud of you. As we drove away from the cemetery, I pulled out the cassette player from my jacket, the same one that had captured Frank's confession. I'd had it repaired, kept it as a reminder. But now, I rolled down the window and threw it into the passing river. The past could stay in the past. We had a future to build. 6 months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a chess set, the same one Frank had given David for his 10th birthday. A note was tucked beneath the board. Mr. Giles, found this in Frank's possessions. Thought it should return to family. Your brother wasn't always a monster. Remember that, even as you celebrate his defeat. A friend. I set up the pieces, remembering Frank teaching David the game. My brother's hands had been gentle, then patient, as he explained strategy to an eager boy. Somewhere between that birthday and our father's death, Frank had lost himself to darkness. But for one afternoon, he'd just been an uncle who loved his nephew. I played a game against myself, thinking of David, of Frank, of all we'd lost and all we'd learned. In chess, as in life, every move has consequences. Frank had played for immediate gain, sacrificing pieces without thought. David had played the long game, sacrificing himself to protect others. Checkmate came as the sun set, painting the room golden. I boxed up the set and put it on the shelf. Someday, I'd teach Sarah's children to play. And I'd tell them about their Uncle David, who faced a monster to save his family. I'd even tell them about their great Uncle Frank as a cautionary tale about the cost of greed. But most of all, I'd teach them what David taught us. That truth no matter how painful, is always worth pursuing. That justice, no matter how delayed, is always worth seeking. And that family, no matter how fractured, is always worth protecting. 1 year after Frank's death, I stood in a packed courtroom as the judge read the final verdicts in what the media had dubbed the Giles family murders. 17 individuals connected to Frank's network had been convicted of various crimes ranging from money laundering to murder for hire. The forensic accountants had tracked down most of Frank's hidden assets, nearly $50 million built on blood and betrayal now frozen and awaiting distribution to victims' families. I testified in each trial, the cassette recording of Frank's confession playing to shocked juries. Every time I heard his voice admitting to killing our father, to poisoning David, to orchestrating years of family murders, it felt surreal. The brother who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd been my best man at my wedding, had become death incarnate for our bloodline. Sarah sat beside me through every proceeding, her law enforcement training well underway. She'd channeled her grief into purpose, graduating top of her criminal justice class, while recovering from both the poisoning and her divorce from Marcus. His prison letters went unopened, returned to sender. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. After the final verdict, Detective Morrison met us on the courthouse steps. He'd become a friend through this ordeal, checking on our family regularly. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Knowing it's finally over." "It'll never be over," I said honestly. "David's still gone, so are the others. But at least their killers face justice." Morrison nodded. David would be proud. His work took down one of the most sophisticated family murder conspiracies we've ever seen. He paused, then added, "There's something else. The FBI wants to use this case for training purposes. With your permission, they'd like to create a study showing how David gathered evidence, how he protected his findings, how one person's courage can expose decades of crime." I looked at Sarah, who nodded immediately. "Do it," I said. "Let David keep teaching people even now. Let every investigator learn from his methods, his bravery." That evening, we held our own memorial at the lake near the cabin where everything had started and ended. Jennifer had remarried, a kind pediatrician who understood her past and honored David's memory. She brought their daughter, little Davina, named for the father she'd never meet, but whose heroism would define her heritage. Ms. Caldwell came too, along with other family members who'd survived Frank's reign of terror. We didn't go to the cabin itself. That cursed place had been demolished, the land donated to the state as parkland. Instead, we gathered at the shore, where Dad had taught us to fish, where happier memories could overshadow the darkness. "I've been thinking about forgiveness," I said, addressing the small crowd. "Not for Frank. Some sins are beyond forgiveness. But for ourselves. For surviving when others didn't. For not seeing the monster among us sooner. For all the ways we failed each other while Frank divided and conquered." Aunt Margaret, my father's sister who'd narrowly escaped becoming one of Frank's victims, stepped forward. "William would want us to forgive ourselves," she said. "He'd want us to rebuild what Frank destroyed. Not just the money or the properties, but the bonds between us." We'd established the William and David Giles Foundation, with the recovered assets dedicated to helping families affected by financial crimes and family violence. The foundation would fund investigations, provide legal aid, and support survivors. Frank had spent 30 years destroying families. We'd spend the next 30 rebuilding them. As sunset painted the lake, golden, Sarah stood to speak. "I've learned something through all this," she said. "Uncle Frank thought money was power. He killed for it, died, for it, sold his soul for it. But real power isn't in bank accounts or insurance policies. It's in truth. It's in courage. It's in a son who loved his family more than his own life, and a father who sought justice instead of revenge." Young Davina toddled to the water's edge, throwing pebbles that sent ripples across the calm surface. Each tiny stone created expanding circles, small actions with far-reaching consequences. Like David's investigation, like Frank's first murder, like every choice that led us to this moment. I want to read something, Jennifer said, pulling out a worn journal. I found this in David's desk. It's from when he first discovered the truth about Frank. She read in a clear voice. Today, I learned my uncle is a killer. The evidence is overwhelming, undeniable. Part of me wants to run to hide, to pretend I never found any of this. But I can't. I think of Dad, of Sarah, of all the cousins and aunts and uncles who could be next. I think of my grandfather murdered for money and power. I'm not a cop. I'm not a hero. I'm just an analyst who noticed patterns others missed. But sometimes that's enough. Sometimes one person standing up to evil is all it takes to start its downfall. If something happens to me, know that I acted out of love, not hatred. Love for my family, love for truth, love for justice, even love for Uncle Frank, or at least for the man he used to be before greed consumed him. Tomorrow, I begin gathering evidence in earnest. I'll be careful, methodical, thorough. I'll build a case so airtight that no amount of money or connections can escape it. And when I'm done, I'll give Frank one chance to confess, to make amends. I pray he takes it. But if he doesn't, if he chooses violence over redemption, then I'll have done my duty. I'll have protected my family the only way I know how, with truth as my shield and justice as my sword. Whoever reads this, remember, evil thrives in silence and secrecy. Shine light into the darkness. Speak truth to power. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. That's our duty as human beings, as family, as children of God. May we all have the courage to do what's right, no matter the cost. By the time Jennifer finished, there wasn't a dry eye among us. David's words, written in the shadow of death, rang with more life than Frank's decades of scheming. This was his true legacy, not just the evidence that convicted killers, but the example that inspired others to stand against evil. As darkness fell, we lit floating candles for each victim. 15 lights drifted across the water, each one a life stolen, a future denied. But as they floated, they seemed to multiply in the reflection, becoming 30, 60 countless points of light pushing back the darkness. Look, little Davina said, pointing at the lights. Stars in the water. Out of the mouths of babes. Stars in the water, light in the darkness, hope from despair. David would have loved the poetry of it. We drove home in contemplative silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The next morning would bring new challenges. Ongoing lawsuits, testimony, and related cases, the slow work of rebuilding fractured family bonds. But tonight, we had peace. I stopped at David's grave on the way home, as had become my weekly ritual. The headstone stood solid and permanent, unlike the temporary marker at his fake funeral. Fresh flowers from Jennifer lay beside older ones from Sarah, from Ms. Caldwell, from classmates and colleagues who remembered him. We did it, son, I said to the silent stone. Frank's network is destroyed. His victims have justice. The family is healing. You did all that. You saved us. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for just a moment I could swear I heard David's voice. No, Dad, we saved each other. That's what families do. I smiled, patting the headstone like I used to pat his shoulder. That's what families do, I repeated. Walking back to my car, I thought about the long road ahead. Sarah would graduate from the FBI Academy in 18 months. Jennifer would raise Davina with stories of her father's heroism. The foundation would help other families facing similar horrors. And somewhere in training facilities and classrooms, future investigators would study David's methods, learning how one determined person could bring down an empire of evil. Frank had thought he was writing our family story in blood and greed. But David had seized the pen, authoring a different ending through courage and sacrifice. The final chapter wasn't about Frank's murders or his money. It was about a son who loved his family enough to die protecting them, and a family who honored that love by choosing justice over revenge, healing over hatred, truth over silence. As I drove toward home, I made a decision. I would write our story, all of it. The good memories of Frank before his fall. The horror of discovering his crimes. David's heroic investigation. The trials and revelations. Future generations of our family deserve to know their history. Not just the darkness Frank brought, but the light David restored. The last words would be David's own from that final video he recorded: "Choose justice, but also choose peace." Words to live by. Words that transform tragedy into triumph, victims into victors, a shattered family into an unbreakable force for good. Frank had played the wolf among sheep for 30 years. But he'd forgotten that sheep have shepherds, and shepherds have the courage to face down any predator. David had been our shepherd, giving his life to protect the flock. Now, we the survivors would carry on his work, ensuring no wolf would ever again hunt among our family. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since David's death. No nightmares of Frank's confession, no visions of family graves. Just dreams of David at 10, learning chess from an uncle who still had a soul. In the dream, David won the game and Frank laughed with genuine pride, the monster not yet born, the hero not yet needed. "Checkmate, Uncle Frank," Dream David announced. "Well played, nephew. Well played indeed." If you've experienced family betrayal or lost someone to violence, I hope this story reminds you that justice is possible and healing can come. Have you ever had to stand up against a family member who was hurting others? How did you find the courage? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this difficult journey. Remember to like this video if it touched you, subscribe to hear more stories of justice and redemption, and share it with others who might need to hear that truth can triumph over evil. Until next time, may you have the wisdom to see the truth, the courage to act on it, and the peace that comes from protecting those you love. Stay strong, seek justice, but always choose peace.